The balance breakdown is back. The last one of the year, the biggest UFC card of the year. And we are here to break it down. Myself, Ian O'Neill, Harry Powell, and Theo Lander are going to bring you through the a turn of events from last Saturday's UFC 296 card. Leon Edwards took out Colby Covington in the main event. Alexandre Pantoja was victorious and defended his flyweight title in the co-main event. Lots of other things happened on the card. Wins for Shavkat Rakhmonov, Josh Emmett, and Paddy Pimblett. We're here. We're going to chat about them. How are the lads doing? Are you keeping well? Did you enjoy the card watching from afar? I was there watching from near, of course, in Las Vegas on the ground. Very excited to talk about the turn of events from the card itself. How are you, Harry?
I'm grand now. It feels like we'll get into this, obviously, right? But it feels as though the card was almost resemblant of the entire year of MMA. There were parts of it that were a bit of a slog. There were some absolutely electric moments, some beautiful moments. And then, it sort of culminated in this co-main event that was nowhere near as good as in this main event that was nowhere near as good as the co-main event, but equally had a bag of storylines. There was a lot of attention, a lot of hype going in. And we got to see, thankfully, a pretty nice story at the end of it, right? All said and done. But yeah, overall, I thought it was fine. I wasn't blown away by the card by any stretch of the imagination. And again, maybe we can talk about that. But some really excellent performances, really a couple of absolute screamers of fights on that card. But yeah, all in all, we are here. We have made it. 52 weeks. Here we are.
There we go. For our troubles, Theo. What are your thoughts on the card overall before we get into it?
It was a great card, but honestly, I don't want to bury the lead here at all, Harry. I think we should honor the fact that we have the presence of Hollywood Ian O'Neill here, who's made quite the impression here at the press conferences. What a week it was from you, my friend. Incredible coverage. Love to see it. And it only added to what was honestly a great fight week. The press conferences were something, but you were a great part of those as well. Card was amazing. Can't wait to break it down with you guys.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Look, from my perspective, the press conferences weren't great in terms of some of the stuff that was said. I was in a difficult position where, the position I was in meant a hell of a lot to me, where I didn't really want to try and let a lot of those things kind of affect, me enjoying the card, me enjoying those events for what it was. I think what I could do from a media perspective is not shine an extra light on what was said in some of those events, not ask any questions to kind of promote any of that kind of stuff as well. Although I did ask a couple of questions and we did get sidetracked, but I mean, these things do happen in MMA sometimes. I mean, I asked Ilia Topuria if he was going to be glad to bring a card back to Georgia and to Spain, and he just took that opportunity to say that Sean Strickland is a piece of shit. So, I mean, what can I do in those circumstances? You know what I mean? But you can only control what you control. But it was a fantastic week. It was a great experience for me. And, the card lost Ian Garry, which would have been a big reason why I would have been heading down there. Look, it was a slightly disappointing, but I think overall it was a good enough card where it didn't have that much of a detriment on the card overall. Definitely there's lots of other stories, lots of other fights, and we'll go straight into the main event. Colby Covington, Leon Edwards, a lot of talk coming in here. This one had a lot of heat coming into it a bit after the comments that were said at the press conference. Obviously, Colby going after Leon's dad. Don't kind of agree with those kind of things myself, but those things add an extra little bit of spice. They added that extra little bit of motivation. And for me, going into that, I was wondering how Leon was going to do it because he was visibly upset about that. Obviously he talked about how upset he was after the fact as well. And, he didn't let it affect his performance all that much. It was a very professional, true performance. And it was very easy for Leon Edwards overall, Harry, wasn't it?
Yeah, look, I think Leon never really had to get out of third gear. you know. And I think maybe now there was a tweet I saw about Wednesday last week, and it was from Luke Thomas, and it basically said, "Oh, the Leon Edwards isn't actually that good crowd are back out." And I think what we saw predominantly throughout those first sort of 2 or 3 rounds was Leon just systematically remove Colby's options, right? What we saw immediately is the forward pressure of Leon Edwards. He kept changing his stance. He kept changing his ranges. He kept changing his angles. He kept offering that teep up the middle as a rangefinder. There was a jab. He showed Colby a counter left hook if Colby chose to step inside of range. He started kicking the legs. He started kicking the body. And so from a kickboxing perspective, Colby had sort of one option, and that was either, 2 options, either dart in and throw some shots in the pocket and potentially get check left hooked, or it was to try and play on the outside and pick Leon off as he came in. Well, Leon was so regimented in his game plan efficacy that he wasn't going to do that, right? At no point was he going to do that. And it wasn't until the 3rd round that we saw Colby actually wrestle. Now, the very interesting thing for me specifically was Leon tried to do very similar to what Volkanovski did, which was he tried to fight the takedown for the first sort of 40% of the takedown. But by the time he realized that Colby was a little bit too deep into the takedown, he just conceded, made sure he had his frames, and then used a really beautiful scissor off balance to force some space, heisted back up, and then immediately took Colby down. And I thought that was a very, very pivotal moment, right? Because it felt there immediately that Colby then had removed all of his options, essentially. And the next 2 rounds were going to be, can I bang him out and clear him? Or is there something else I have in the locker? And, you know, we can go round by round. Obviously, there's 3 of us, so we need to incorporate Theo as well. But I was very impressed by Leon Edwards. Very impressed.
A couple of things I'll ask Theo on that. Number one, were you surprised it took so long for Colby to go for the takedown? Obviously, Harry had said that just after recording the Ultra Angle, forgive me. Obviously, Harry had said that, you know, it was the 3rd round before we seen Colby take the shots. And what Leon had done so well was kind of take away some of the tools from Colby by kicking that leg on the feet, and then ultimately by him going for a takedown and Leon responding with a successful takedown, kind of took away that option for him as well. And I mean, just winning all of those little mini battles inside the octagon on Saturday night, it was super impressive.
Yeah, man, it just felt like Colby never really got going, to be honest with you. Like the first 2 rounds were such a stalemate, and, you know, we were like a minute into the fight, and the commentary team was saying something along the lines of, you know, we never see Colby start a fight like this. He's always about putting the pace on, putting the pressure on, you know, and we talked about in the breakdown, like that's kind of how everyone envisioned this fight was, all right, Colby's going to push the pace, and we'll see if, you know, Leon can catch him as well on the way in. But man, it was like Leon was leading the dance the entire time. And like you mentioned, he only went for the takedown in the 3rd round. And when Leon had the chance to return the favor and he took Colby down himself, that's when I felt like this fight was over. That's when I felt like the wind just got taken out of his sails. I mean, I don't know if, you know, maybe like the moment got to Colby, if, you know, the concept of maybe this might be his last shot, the title is what sort of made him feel that extra nerves in the moment, because he's been in big fights before. Was it the fact that Trump was there, the fact that so much was made of the drama between them during fight week? Was he feeling a little bit of regret that he took it too far at the press conference? There's a lot of stuff that could have played into that, but honestly, man, Colby Covington, like Dana White said in the press conference, which I think was kind of harsh, but I kind of have to echo it because I agree with it. He looked older. He looked slower. He did not look like the guy that, you know, we saw even 2 years ago against Jorge Masvidal, which was a little bit of an underwhelming performance as well. You know, at this age, at that division, if you take that much time off, if you're not able to get those reps in, if you have all these extracurriculars going around outside the cage, it's not a recipe for success. And I think Saturday was just like another exhibit of that.
Absolutely. It was kind of a classic case of his bark being bigger than his bite. And when they did get in there, and as Harry quickly described, you know, Leon just took full advantage of that. He was a guy that didn't react to any of the talk. He went in there with his game plan and executed it excellently inside the octagon. Harry, if you want to go through rounds 1 to 5 real quick and just highlight some of the main talking points for you that stood out, when the both of these guys faced off. You're on mute.
I am on mute. I apologize. I think the thing that just blew me away immediately was Colby's lack of ability to get anywhere near the inside space, because Leon would just constantly, either if he was in a southpaw stance, he would constantly angle off to his right and show the left hook, or if he was in an orthodox stance, he would constantly be just beating that center line, beating that center line, beating that center line. He would come in an angle and out on an angle. He'd constantly be threatening the lead hand of Colby, so Colby knew that there wasn't going to be a shot that was going to be immediately available, right? Because he knew that that left hand was going to be occupied at all times. He then, when he tried to come in, there'd be a leg kick. On the way out, there's a body teep. When Leon is trying to angle Colby towards the fence so that they can get into either clinch exchanges or Leon can start to tee off, there's that teep up the middle that's forcing Colby to make decisions as to whether he wants to enter a pocket and possibly have a range-finding teep smash into his nose, or whether he's going to instead look for other opportunities. And I thought Leon's ability to stay tall but still keep quite low in his knees and allow Colby the threat of thinking that a takedown was there but never actually having to capitalize on it was masterful. Now, obviously there wasn't a ton that happened immediately in that round, but I think we're now so used to seeing fights like that from Leon Edwards. That tells us something. And it doesn't tell us that the people that are going against Leon Edwards are stalling because they don't want to fight him or whatever. It tells you that there are micro battles that are happening in those exchanges, in those footwork exchanges, in those range exchanges that we are either not privy to because we're not in the cage and we're not as skilled as those fighters are. But it tells you that Leon is doing things with his head movement, with his eye gaze, with his feet, with the angle of his body that is forcing these fighters to really think twice about entering the pocket. I saw a moment on commentary where they were talking a little bit about speed. I mean, I think regardless, Leon's not the quickest fighter in the world, and I think that leans more towards what Theo and Dana were saying, which is that Colby looked a little slower, a little older. But I felt like also Colby just looked labored. You know, like some of the way he was throwing his left high kick, he was really aggressively leaning towards his right hand side and almost sticking that right arm out, almost like a guardrail, if you will, right? Because it felt like he was struggling to lift that left leg up. Now, is that maybe a touch of an injury that we're looking at? Is there something else that's going on that's brought him into this fight? Is it, as you've said, that when he was stood up there at the weigh-ins and he said to Leon, I was in character, is that a slight mental break that we saw before Colby came in? Because the thing that came to me at the end of the first, Colby walked away to his corner and took a big exhale out and his eyes widened a little bit.
He was even doing that on the way to the octagon, in my opinion. I looked at him on the big screen and you could see him he was like blowing air. He was like trying to control his breathing. It looked like he knew that this was a big moment for him. This is probably the last time he was going to have a chance to fight for UFC gold. The UFC put a lot of weight on him and his relationship with Donald Trump as well. Donald Trump was in attendance. Big moment there for him, Theo, to kind of have to come in and deal with it. Do you think that the pressure got to him in a little bit?
I mean, it had to have, right? I don't know how it wouldn't have at that point. There was just so many things that we were mentioning here that were piling up on him. And to touch back on the walkout here, every time Colby Covington fights, I watch him walk out and I think to myself, oh my God, this guy is so nervous. Because like you said, head down, looking at the floor, walking kind of slowly, big breaths. But then, by the time he hits the crowd, by the time he's walking in the cage, he looks fine. I didn't see that recovery in this fight. Even it stood out how much more nervous he looked to me in this fight compared to his other ones. Like I 100% think that the pressure got to him. I think a lot of the talk got to him. And I want to say this, in a sport where the morals are very questionable, there's a lot of shady characters at every single level, from fighters to management to media to promoters, everyone in between. Colby Covington stands out as the most bastardized character in the entire sport. Even other fighters lack respect for this guy. You don't see media members ever really coming out and having truly disrespectful things to say about fighters, even some that deserve it. The fact that Colby Covington has isolated himself as much as he has only speaks to the amount of disgusting vitriol he spit out. And that's honestly why you're seeing a lot of people reveling in this defeat. Even when he lost to Kamaru Usman, like, he looked good. There was argument that he won the second fight in some people's eyes, and he had great moments too as well. Even the win against Jorge Masvidal, which, like I said earlier, was underwhelming, still sort of brought people a reason to cheer. This is a true loss that not only signifies probably his last chance at a title shot in his career, but one where he did not look great. And that's why you're seeing the reaction that you're seeing.
Yeah, very well said, Theo, because that's one thing that Colby always had for himself, was that even though he may have been an asshole outside of the cage, when he got in there, he did always perform, and he performed well, but he did not perform on Saturday night when it mattered most. And that'll be, that'll be a big worry to him, I guess, at this stage of his career. And it'll be interesting to see what is next for him. It's got to be Belal Muhammad next for the title, though, Harry. What do you think?
Look, I think we are back at the age-old point here, where is the UFC a meritocracy or not? Because if the UFC is a meritocracy, then the answer is Belal Muhammad, without a shadow of a doubt. But Belal Muhammad has been sidelined for just a little while, right? He hasn't had a fight in just a short while, and Shavkat Rakhmonov went out and just destroyed Wonderboy Thompson, right? And so what do the UFC actually do? The likelihood is, to me, Leon's already sort of put some dampener on the Belal Muhammad name, but has said, oh, Shavkat's an interesting fight. Like, I don't know. Are we going to have a Tony Ferguson type deal here? Are we going to have a Beneil Dariush type deal here? Are we going to have an Arnold Allen type deal here? Well, Belal Muhammad is just never going to get a fucking title shot. And instead, it's going to be the next guy. Because you best believe that if Shavkat gets the shot, Ian Gary's going to fight Jeff Neal. And if Jeff Neal and the Ian Gary fight goes how we expect it to go, and Ian looks great and gets a big finish, you may well see Ian Gary fight the winner of Shavkat versus Leon, right? And then again, Belal Muhammad is skipped over. Do I think Belal deserves a shot? Without a shadow of a doubt. I think he's done more than enough. Do I see the UFC giving it to him? I don't know, Chief.
I was outspoken in saying that with Ian Gary's fight falling out, that maybe Belal Muhammad should have been a little bit more outspoken and maybe wanting to take that fight. He had dropped weight. He was on weight for the championship fight. He would have been ready to go. Now, he did only fight for Vicente Luque 2 fights ago and won, but what's stopping him from getting in there again and taking that fight? I mean, what you want is, and what you need in the UFC is the fans to be behind you. That's what will help you get a title shot. How do you get the fans behind you? Yes, it's not the wisest move to make, but sometimes you got to take those risks, Theo. You know what I mean? You got to go in and kind of, at least push for that. He said nothing at all. He stayed quiet. Even if he had spoken up and not got the fight, fans would have said, hey, look, he was in for this fight, but he never said anything. He was kind of the forgotten guy. There was fights offered to Vicente Luque. I don't know whether Belal Muhammad was one of those fights, but the fact that he was not outspoken about that, I think that's going to be to his detriment here as well. And look, I'm just saying this because this is the way it is in the UFC. I'm not saying that this is the way it should be, but you got to get those fans wanting to see you in that title fight. That's going to be half the battle to kind of get you in. Do you think he might have missed the trick by doing that?
I honestly don't feel that way, and for a couple of reasons. One, he was there to be the backup, right? So if you slide him off of that spot, right, to go fight Luque, then who's going to be your backup? I know that some people think that the backup is really an important role, and I kind of agree with that. But in the eyes of the UFC, they're probably telling him, you are not coming off of this role. We paid you a certain amount to be here, to make weight, and that's what we want you to do. So I believe that's probably the reason why he didn't push so hard for that. And secondly, to your question, why wouldn't he just step in? You have to sort of take these risks. He just did that. He just did that with Gilbert Burns. And, also, if we're sort of reading the tea leaves here, what did Dana White tell us after the Usman Edwards trilogy? That Colby Covington was next because he came and weighed in. Now, I know Dana White is not a man to take his word, and I certainly am not saying that that's what we should do here. But if you're Belal Muhammad and you're his manager and you're looking at the situation, you're saying, well, okay, well, we'll do this. We'll play your game. We'll come in. We'll weigh in. We'll be the backup. God forbid something happens and we have to jump in on short notice here. But they did everything right, in my opinion. Now, what else does Belal Muhammad have to do?
He still had Dana White saying non-committal in the post-fight press conference, which isn't a good sign, if we're being honest. And look, I can't argue too much of what you're saying either, Theo. I I think that that's what you kind of have to do. And, you know, he does take chances, but like, I mean, I don't know, with all due respect to Vicente Luque, when you're performing at the level of abilities that Belal Muhammad is performing at right now, I don't think Vicente Luque is that tough of a test to come in. People want to say he doesn't want to take a fight at short notice. Well, guess what? If you had been a backup for the championship fight, you would have been taking a fight on short notice anyway, because you wouldn't have known who you would have been fighting. So, yeah. I mean, yeah, I know I wasn't asking him to give up that kind of slot, but like in terms, if he wasn't needed for that, then you make the Vicente Luque fight. I don't know, it's up in the air, but it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Well, here's the other thing too, right? And again, we're assuming a lot of things right now because we don't really know what the conversations are backstage. We don't know who the UFC actually wants to slide in. We don't know how the managers are handling these conversations, right? If we're going by what Dana White said, they had offered Vicente Luque 5 different matchups after the Ian Gary fight fell through, and he said no to all of them. Who's to say Belal Muhammad wasn't one of those guys? You know, maybe this did happen behind the scenes and we just had no idea of it. So, I mean, I don't want to be the guy who comes out and criticizes Belal on the spot, especially when, like I said, he just did this with Gilbert Burns back in May, right? So, yeah. I mean, it's a tough spot to be in for him. Obviously, you know, I wouldn't be shocked if Shavkat jumped over in the rankings, but man, it's got to be Belal next. It's got to be Belal.
Yeah, no, I agree. Harry?
This is just I want to just criticize Leon Edwards. So if there's anything that you want to round up on before we get there, then feel free.
No, go ahead.
Sure. I just, it's tough to criticize him because he's so good at so many things, right? But I do think that by the 3rd round, when he was still full of gas, right? He didn't look tired at all. He looked supremely conditioned and he had taken away a lot of those Colby tools. I really wanted him to see him put the foot on the gas just a little bit more, right? Yeah. Like he'd won the first 3 rounds. And so barring something fucking mental happening, right? And, you know, he lands himself in a bad spot, gets finished, whatever. I need to see some dominance now, you know? And like, look, I know that this is a sporting occasion. I know that there's a job that he has to do professionally here, but I think you also have to let a little bit of that anger out. You know, if you're round 3, if I'm in Leon Edwards' corner, I'll be saying, just give it to him now. Right? Like, you know that you're better than this guy. You know you can take him down. You know you can get back up from the takedowns. You can give it to him now. Like, let a little bit of it out now. Just a little bit. Let's see if we can hurt him a little bit. Let's see if we can make a statement here. Because the thing that really would have capped this, not just the card off, but the story for Leon Edwards, I think the thing that would have catapulted Leon Edwards from that evening is a finish. If he goes out when he took Colby's back, he didn't try and choke him once. He was more focused on getting the bottom hook in. And I think that talks a lot to Leon's character, that everything is systematic, everything is perfect, everything is beautiful, right? But you're in a fucking fight, like. And if you're on somebody's back with a significant amount of time to work, if he finishes Colby there, the roof goes off, like. The roof absolutely goes off. And he jumps on the mic, and it's not just those comments really affected me. It's, I let those comments do the talking. I finished that cunt. Look at him now. I put him to sleep, or I had him tapping in front of his Donald Trump, or this or that. Do you know what I mean? Like, the rhetoric changes. And so I think when we're moving forward with Leon Edwards as a champion, if he is interested at all in really going over with the fans, I think the advice is exactly the same as the advice that Dana White gave to Kamaru Usman. And that's that you just got to fucking finish people. You just have to.
Yeah, definitely. And I would have been critical of Israel Adesanya for the same thing as well. And, you know, that's a very true and fair statement in my eyes for Leon's fight as well. And, you know, that's the UFC don't like seeing that either, like having fans boo on the main event, and fans were booing throughout that main event, which doesn't bode well for Belal Muhammad too, because are the UFC looking at Leon Edwards as a champion that they want at the helm, or do they want somebody else up there? You know, you got to be thinking about those things as well. But look, at fair play to Leon. He did what he had to do. It was a big moment for him too. I mean, he was under that spotlight as well, and he got the job done. I guess one thing that could be said is that he got it done with relative ease, really, to be honest. Did look a little bit tired though towards the end after a couple of those grappling exchanges, but we shall move on. And grappling exchanges were aplenty in the co-main event as well. Brandon Royval and Alexandre Pantoja went to war, and it was to be expected in this one, Harry. I mean, you have your hands on your head, you have your hands in the air, you're shaking your head. You must have been impressed with what you seen, sir.
I fucking loved this fight. Like, what an absolutely beautiful display of mixed martial arts that we got to see. Just fucking fantastic. I mean, Pantoja over 2 rounds gives me 3-round Jose Aldo vibes. He really does. Like, in that everything is just so menacing and so hurtful and so damaging. And look, sure, by the end of the third, he was bollocks, right? And he did his best to get Royval down, and he got through those last 2 rounds, and he did so with some craftsmanship and some veteranship and whatever. But though 3-round Pantoja, if we could have title fights with Pantoja in and they're just 3 rounds, you can sign me all the way fucking up right now. Royval as well was just an unbelievable challenger. Wanted to throw damage from absolutely everywhere, didn't accept positions, tried his absolute hardest to scramble at any moment that he possibly could. On the feet, looked great. Just that Pantoja puzzle is a real tough one to solve. And something, again, that Shawnee and I talked about in our severe spotlight. That's an article that I write and nothing to do with Shawnee at all. In the Speaker's Corner, we talked about how MMA has sort of changed globally over 2023 and into 2024 and what our predictions are. And one of the main things that I said that I've noticed over 2023 and going into 2024 is that one of the absolute apex skills that you need to have is the ability to withstand damage. And in that co-main event, that's exactly what we saw. Both lads took so much fucking damage and still powered on through, was fighting to the absolute nth degree. It was just wonderful. Absolutely fucking wonderful fighting.
Yeah, it was brilliant to watch. Pantoja highlighted in the post-fight press conference, him wanting to rely on some body work, and he said he was amazed at the level of damage that Royval was able to tear to the body, Theo, going into that fight. And another thing that I asked Royval, and I asked Pantoja about it after the fight as well, which kind of brought on that answer, was, the importance of the scramble positions in this fight. And we talked about it on the preview show. I asked Royval about it, and he felt that was an area, Brandon Royval, he felt that he needed to improve coming in to this Pantoja fight. And I really think he did improve in that aspect. And, Pantoja tried his best to get him out of there and almost tired himself out. Although Pantoja is a guy that kind of looks tired all the time. It's hard to know how tired he is in certain occasions, but he definitely, I do agree. I think he was getting exceptionally tired in the 3rd round, and he had to dig deep in round 4 and kind of came on strong again in round 5 as well. I agreed with the scorecards, to be honest, and I'm curious to hear what you thought of the fight overall.
Yeah, I mean, like, one of the experiences that I think MMA fans around the world will all unanimously share is when you try to introduce the sport to some of your friends, colleagues, whatever it may be, and it goes to the mat. And then you have a problem because a lot of people, who are watching it for the first time are like, what the hell am I watching? What is this? Why are they just laying on top of each other? They're not doing anything. This is a fight that I would show to a new fan who wants to see exciting grappling because, oh my goodness, like Alexandre Pantoja is fantastic scrambling. It is a joy and a pleasure to watch that guy refuse to accept position, refuse to give up on a scramble, and always search for something else to get back on top. I mean, I'm not going to get too much in the X's and O's of BJJ because that's Harry Powell's job, but it was fantastic to watch. And the first few rounds of that fight, like you said, when they both had gas and they were going at that highest pace they could go, that's MMA at the highest level. And there was also a lot of talk coming into this as well that flyweights were not giving them as much attention. We even touched on the balance breakdown. And a lot of people sort of chalk this up as, oh yeah, Royval might win. Flyweight's kind of a division where it's, hot potato with the belt, could go either way. After this fight, man, and I know it wasn't like this world beater dominant performance, I think Pantoja holds on to this belt for a while. I really believe he is solid in so many different areas. He's tenacious with his striking. And exactly like Harry said, he's in those first 3 rounds, he's like 3-round Aldo. Everything is thrown with the intent to hurt and damage you. He's fantastic to watch. And to a new fan of the sport, I would say watch these guys grapple.
Oh, absolutely. And you could say that about many flyweight fights as well. I thought it wasn't the best Pantoja. I thought he fought way more better against Brandon Moreno, but sometimes you can fall into the trap of fighting to the level of your opponent per se, and with all due respect given to Brandon Royval on that occasion. But Harry, what I want to ask you is what I asked Pantoja. That flyweight title fight was the first time in 5 years that we've not had a guy called Davison Figueiredo or Brandon Moreno in a title fight at flyweight. And we need some fresh meat and we need some fresh blood in that division. We need to kind of spark it up a little bit. And, he's keeping an eye on everybody. Obviously, Moreno was the backup fighter for that. He is going to be going in to fight Amir Albazi. Amir Albazi. And, we've got Makayev versus Perez. We've got Mateus Nicolau versus Manuel Cap coming up. So we've got plenty of guys coming here. Some new faces, some old faces. What would you like to see happen in the landscape of the flyweight division? Look, I know a lot depends on the results of certain fights, but would you like to see some fresh faces at the top?
Without a shadow of a doubt. Look, I think for me, the next title contention is either Manel Cape or Amir Albazi if they win. I think Manel Cape is going to do a bit of shit talking, right? And is probably going to get fucking smoked. And then Amir Albazi will do less shit talking and probably get smoked as well. But look, I think you need to circulate the division. We do not want to end up where we are or were at 155, where if your name is not Michael Chandler, Dustin Poirier, or just Justin Gaethje, that you don't fight for a title, right? And Brandon Moreno has had his time, and flyweight is competitive enough and is circulating enough that there are some really interesting, really fun matchups for him. Like, let's say Moreno beats Albazi and Muhammad Makayev wins his next fight. Let's do that one, right? And then if Moreno beats Makayev, okay, cool. Then chuck him into a title shot because he's won 3 straight. Fine, no problem. If Makayev beats Moreno, well, boy, oh boy, oh boy. There's your bona fide title contention, right? Beats next champion, etc., etc. There's still a Kai Kara France performance for maybe a Makayev or somebody else. There's a ton of spinning plates here, but I think let's start lining up contenders and let's not wait so long to give contenders in a division that is so richly skilled and talented, where I think if you lose one fight, it really doesn't matter that much. Like if you win one or win 2, in and up and around that upper echelon, you should be getting a title shot. And so it's Manel Cape with a win or Amir Albazi with a win for me.
Yeah, absolutely. You highlighted the severe spotlight. Now it's time to give it a plug. Your guy this week was Shavkat Rakhmonov. I think he put in an excellent performance against Dominic Cruz. Look, when we're talking about a guy like Shavkat Rakhmonov, I feel it's important to highlight the fact that, number one, this guy is undefeated. But number 2, the fact that this guy has not seen 3 rounds in his mixed martial arts career so far. And the way he goes in and handles these guys, he is legit the boogeyman at 170. I think he is the guy at 170, and he's the future of the 170-pound division. From what we've seen, based off anyone that's in the top 10, top 15 so far, unless, obviously other performances may change opinions, but that's my opinion right now. You chose him as your severe spotlight this week, Harry. I'm going to ask you to kind of highlight why you did that.
Sure. Before I start, I just want to say that was my 84th severe spotlight. So we should hit 100 next year, which is a cool thing. But anyway, a fighter, I wrote in the severe spotlight that Shavkat's record, the fighters that he is fighting, their record combined is something like 200 wins and like 23 losses. So at no point in his career has he had a padded fight, a padded record, a weekend warrior. He is fighting very, very, very solid competition his entire way through. He had 2 losses at amateur in a 3-fight amateur career, and then goes on and wins 18 straight with 18 finishes. That is absolutely unbelievable. heard of. 6 of those finishes have come in the UFC, and 6 of those finishes have come against good, solid names in the UFC. Wonderboy Thompson is absolutely no slouch whatsoever. Even at 40, nearly 41, there is still elements of Wonderboy Thompson's game that is very, very, very dangerous. Now, was this a favorable matchup for Rakhmonov? Yeah, of course it was. It absolutely was, right? Like, it absolutely was. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is, regardless of danger, still 40 years of age. But Rakhmonov went in that first round and played the game plan to an absolute T. It felt obvious to me specifically that the game plan was to go in, was to try and establish a rhythm, establish some dominant footwork, push Wonderboy back, and then wrestle. And when you wrestle, if you finish him, great, no problem. If a finish arises, sure, go for it, no problem. Other than that, we are looking to fill him up, fill his arms full of lactic acid, fill his legs full of lactic acid, allow him to start building back up, then start stripping posts and start just dominating him. Start making him see that there is no way that as soon as we grapple and link up, that he's 1, escaping, 2, getting back to his feet and getting back to dominant position. There's just not going to happen. And I saw a lot of shit online about Rakhmonov's first round performance, and I just don't buy it at all. Like, first of all, afterwards, we found out about the ankle issue. Again, we don't know how severe that ankle issue is, but not being able to train for 3 weeks before a fight like this is, it is pretty significant. But to then come in and see the second round performance where he'd made his reads, he allowed Wonderboy to blitz, and he countered him, and then just wrecked him on the ground was just out of this fucking world, like absolutely out of this world. And the method with which he did it, we could talk, specifics in a moment, but the method with which he did it.
Talk specifics right now if you want.
Oh, sure. So at the start of the second round, Rakhmonov allows Wonderboy to blitz. And as Wonderboy is about to finish the blitz, he takes his head off the center line and lands a clean right hand that pushes Wonderboy back a little bit. Wonderboy then starts to flick out that lead leg as he does, right? Rakhmonov catches it. Wonderboy tries to turn out and rip his leg out, and Rakhmonov just chases him to the fence. As soon as Rakhmonov gets that back body lock and drops him to the ground, what you see a lot of fighters do is they follow down with that back body lock, and then their hips are somewhat level with their partner's hips, which makes it, if the posts aren't being stripped of your opponent's far hand, then it becomes more of a scramble, right? What you see often is what we saw with Leon, where he'll win the inside elbow as he starts to rise against that back body lock. And obviously with Leon, he managed to hit an Uchimata counter and do the things fine. What Rakhmonov did, which was just so impressive, is as he drops Wonderboy, he stays on his feet and he starts in a piking position where he's crowding Wonderboy's hips. His right hand swims behind Wonderboy's back and gets what we call, it's colloquially called a Dagestani handcuff, but in wrestling it's called a wrist ride, right? Which essentially means your opponent can't base out with their right hand, which means they can't lift their hips up, which means they can't build height. And you're constantly looking at stripping that post and controlling that right hand. Wonderboy can't move his hips out towards that right-hand side because his arm is in the way. And so Shavkat just pins him in that piking position, covers his hips, works very slowly to a grapevine on the left leg, and then just starts battering him, right? Knowing that Wonderboy's got 2 options. He can either concede to his back, meaning that he's solidifying himself in bottom position, or he can really aggressively try and strip that wrist ride, which means he's just getting battered a little bit more, right? Shavkat then starts to take Wonderboy's back and hits what we call a police tuck, where he posts Wonderboy's hand behind his own back and then tries to lock up a body triangle around it. He wasn't super successful with that. Fine, whatever. And then he just starts threatening chokes. So we've gone from positional control and just really demonstrable position control to then offering an awkward dilemma. He then starts immediately searching for the finish of the fight. Wonderboy toughs out a choke, ends up in bottom half guard. Shavkat just destroys him, takes his back from a front headlock exchange, and no hooks. Not a single hook in sight. Can't even be bothered. His ankle probably hurts. He's like, fuck it, I'm not going to bother feeding it. I'm just going to mandible strangle the cunt. And to be able to get the squeeze without engaging your hips, that's all upper body, that's all that. And that was not a face choke. The pit of Shavkat's arm, the pit of the elbow was dead on in Wonderboy's chin. What's happening there is he is choking Wonderboy with his own jaw. He is dragging Wonderboy's jaw back through his esophagus, cutting off the carotid arteries and finishing him with his own jaw. That man is a fucking savage, an absolute savage. And yeah, I couldn't have been more impressed. Just brilliant.
I couldn't be more impressed with that breakdown, to be honest with you. And Theo, let's talk about what's next for Shavkat Rakhmonov. Look at title could be a possibility here, but if we're going to take away the title shot here, if we're going to go down the level of the UFC doing the right thing and giving Bilal the next title shot, who would you like to see Shavkat in there with next?
Give him to Colby Covington. Make that fight happen, please. I love that matchup. I honestly feel like, welterweight's had this big problem. A lot of like what lightweight has it over the last couple of years, where the top guys kind of like don't really defend their spot really. Colby Covington's been one of those guys. When was the last time Colby Covington fought a true contender that wasn't a champion already, right? Like you would have to go back to like maybe the Rafael dos Anjos fight for the interim title, because Woodley was way past his prime, as was Lawler, as was Masvidal. It's about time Colby defends his spot and sort of takes on one of these up-and-coming guys. Shavkat's a monster. If anyone's earned a fight with Colby Covington, which, despite all of the things we've had to say about him, is still going to be high profile, especially if it's like a main event of a fight night or something like that. If anyone has earned that spot, it's Shavkat Rakhmonov. This guy's spectacular. Give him a platform to show the world how great he is, much like he did on this card. I think that's the fight to make.
I absolutely agree with you that that's the fight to make, but I don't think that number one, the UFC will make it. I don't think number two, that Colby Covington wants anything to do with that type of fight.
I kind of agree with you, yeah.
So I will see your Colby Covington matchup, and I don't want to say raise you because I don't want to think it's a better one, but put him in there with Kamaru Usman. Let Kamaru Usman come back down. Put him in there with Kamaru Usman, and let's see what is.
Fuck what I said. You're right. Put him with Usman. That's a way better fight. I want that.
Because with Usman there, Usman is going to force him into the striking realm a little bit more. I'm curious to see how dominant he would be in some of the grappling exchanges with Usman. And I think, a win over Usman is going to give you a hell of a lot more kind of kudos from the fans and from media, from whoever, than a win over Colby Covington. Now, if you're Colby Covington, you want to take that Shavkat Rakhmonov fight, because you go out there and perform like you performed, like dog shit, to be honest. You want to gain the respect, at least somewhat respect, of the last of the people that respect you in the sport. You do that by taking on the biggest threat into the division, but Colby Covington hasn't done that ever in his career, and he's not going to start doing that right now at this late stage of his career either. So I think for next, you bring down Kamaru Usman back down to the welterweight division, you put him in there with Shavkat, and I think that's a hell of a fight. Now, you do have that little bit of a wrinkle that Usman and kind of Shavkat have trained at Killcliff and stuff like that, but we've gotten over that a little bit before with other Usman fights. So I think that's the fight I would love to see if it's not the title shot. I think Shavkat does need one more too, let's be real. I think with the competition that he has faced, decent challenges for the stages of his career, but somewhat favorable matchups, and he needs one of these top 3 elite level guys at welterweight, and I would suggest that Kamaru Usman is the man to do that. So that wraps us up for that. Not last on the card, but second to last on the main card, Paddy Pimblett took home a unanimous decision win over Tony Ferguson. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of the fight, Theo, maybe I'll go to you first. It's I thought that Paddy Pimblett had a really good week media-wise. I thought he portrayed himself quite well. I asked him about a lot of the outside noise that was going into his fight with Jared Gordon. He said it did affect him mentally too. A lot less of that coming around this time against Tony Ferguson here. Thought he spoke well and the pre-fight media day, and throughout the press conferences, etc. And obviously, we can talk about the fight in just a moment. But yeah, what are your thoughts on how he handled this fight week?
I thought he did amazing, honestly. It felt like this fight week, the big theme for him was redemption. Let's get back in the good graces of the fans. And he knew he had work to do with it. You could tell he was a bit more reserved than usual in a lot of the answers he was given. He was being a lot more candid, honestly, than I'd seen him before. And also, like, the way that he was going back and forth with Tony at the press conference, there's a right way and a wrong way to do that when you have a guy who's as respected as the fans like Tony Ferguson is. And I thought Paddy did the right way. I thought they kept it light. They kept it fun. It was purely like a competition sort of animosity they had between each other. And even with the fight, you know, it was a good performance over Tony. He got the win, obviously. And it wasn't like he, you know, took it to him afterwards. Like, he didn't really try to kill him on the mic or anything like that. So, you know, I feel like this week did a lot for his popularity, especially over here in the States. Like, when he was on that winning streak, you know, to begin in the UFC, a lot of people who don't really watch MMA a lot were coming up to me and asking me about this guy. And that went away almost completely after the Jared Gordon fight. This one had people talking. And I think Paddy Pimblett finds himself in another big spot coming out of this fight. You know, I don't know when they're going to go back to London. I don't know when they're going to go to Manchester, which is something that people have been throwing around as well. I'd imagine Paddy Pimblett is very high up on those cards as well. And we sort of get back into that groove of, you know, maybe we throw him a guy who's, you know, not as dangerous that he can sort of excel against as well. The question is going to become, how long you're going to give him these favorable matchups for. Like, at some point, you're going to have to give him someone who's going to put him in danger. But regardless, I guess the UFC is sort of just kind of riding this high. I don't think they have a world champion on their hands with Paddy Pimblett. I think they're wise enough to know what his limit is. But I guess the question is, you know, how are they going to capitalize on his star power?
That's the thing. It's capitalizing on that star power. Look, we have said this, Harry, about Paddy for quite some time. The UFC are portraying Paddy and matching Paddy to build upon that star power as much as they can, but there's going to come a time where he is going to have to be matched up with elite level lightweights. And is there anything that you've seen in that fight with Tony Ferguson that makes you believe that, you know, he could go on and put a run in against the top 15, top 10 in the lightweight division, one of the most difficult divisions in the UFC right now?
No. Look, what we saw was Paddy noticed early that the leg kicks were affecting Tony, right? And so did a good job in that first round of smashing away at those legs, but he did so immaturely that he was getting clipped and he was getting touched. And okay, look, Tony Ferguson's not hurting him, right? He's not wobbling him. There's no big problems here, right? But at no point did it really ever feel like Paddy was throwing from a balanced perspective. It feels as though Paddy's a little bit longer than he realizes he is, right? He covers distance quite well, covers distance quite quickly when he does throw the elongated, stretched out back leg kicks. The head movement is still not great. Defensively, the head movement's still not great. He's still on the center line when he throws. When he does throw, he's throwing because he feels like he's going to be thrown on, right? And so it's rather than his eyes are focused and he's setting the shot and he knows what's coming and he's dealing with it. It's, your man's throwing punches at me, so I'm going to throw punches back, right? That feels like where we are with the rudimentary level of striking. Equally, when he does hurt Tony and he does drop him, the lack of clinical finishing is alarming. It's absolutely alarming. We're talking about a guy that's nearly had 30 professional fights, right? How can you be punching arms, shoulders, and the mat and anything but Tony Ferguson trying to finish that fight? Like, he couldn't decide whether he wanted to bang him out, whether he wanted to try and finish with chokes, whether he wanted to try and dominate the position. It was all just a rush job. And he said himself in the post-fight press conference that he kind of gassed himself out a little bit in that first round. If that's the level of effort that gasses you out, and we get to see what we saw in rounds 2 and 3, which, you know, Tony fell over in the second round and Paddy couldn't have been given a better gift if it, you know, for Christmas, full stop, because he then managed to stay on top and he did well enough on top, landed a bit of damage, did some nice guard work and whatever. But then in the third round, Tony was doing a lot of work from the bottom. It wasn't enough, but he was doing a lot of work from the bottom. And look, I have 2 names for you, right? The first one is Matt Frivola, because I just think that's the obvious choice, right? 2 bangers. If Paddy can get him down, then we could be looking at some stuff happening on the bottom, right? But if not, they're both going to go in. They're going to throw some stuff that's around the similar level of Paddy. The other one, and this is a more strategic thought, and I'll tee it up and then I'll give the name. If you're the UFC, you can now have Paddy over for the next 3 to 4 months, lots of interviews, talk about Tony, get him in the barstool thing, get him here, get him there, get his face everywhere, really start to build his stock up and whatever. And you can also give him some time to continue to improve as an actual athlete, as an actual fighter, right? There's a man that's going to be off for a little short while that would happily do a bit of the standing, the trading. He could happily headline a UFC Fight Night card. And if you take him down, is quite susceptible to finishes, and that man's Dan Hooker.
Yeah, Jesus. I do fear for that. I do fear for Paddy Pimblett.
Sure, but if he takes him down, I think he could probably finish Dan Hooker on the ground.
Yeah. And look at coming off a long injury layoff and everything like that. A lot of things going on with Paddy, but there is a slight worry that we're not seeing any great improvements in between fights here. We're just seeing the same old. And look at what Paddy is doing. Look at, he's made a savage name for himself. He's, this talked about guy, and he's been very successful, and I hope he's getting paid inside the UFC. But, there will come a time where that kind of challenge will have to be accepted. So it'll be interesting to see how he deals with it. Now, there's not too many names left inside the lightweight division. That's the problem. So whoever Paddy picks next, or whoever the UFC picks next, he did mention Rafael dos Anjos. I think that's an extremely difficult fight for him too, to be honest.
Paul Hughes at 155.
Now you're talking. Get Paul Hughes in here. Let's do it.
Hey, and by the way, if we're throwing out guys who aren't in the UFC right now, you guys are probably going to hate what I'm going to say right now, but tell me that people won't want to tune in to see Paddy Pimblett versus Dillon Danis. And I know Dillon Danis is this character that people aren't going to want to see. And I have my own personal opinions about Dillon, of course. But that is a fight where, of course, Paddy can win. Dillon's a bit bigger. I could see a game plan where he could win as well. That's a jiu-jitsu player's favorite matchup they could have. That is going to be...
How fucking dare you?
I'm just saying, the UFC, don't act like the UFC is above this at all. Do not act like
no, it's like I would feel that you're just disrespecting yourself as a fighter if you're putting yourself in there with Dillon Danis as well.
I think there's a lot of guys in the UFC who would jump on that fight immediately. That's a fight where you're going to get a lot of eyeballs. You're probably going to get an easy finish. I don't think that that's totally out of the realm of possibility here. And if you want to get that sort of fan base engaged in this fight, Dillon Danis is the perfect guy to make yourself look like the babyface against.
Commissioned? Could you even get that commissioned? Dillon Danis has had 3 professional fights, right? Paddy Pimblett's had 24 professional fights.
I mean, if they can get CM Punk in, they can get anybody in.
They can get them in.
Yes,
they can get it happen. And I'm just saying it would be massive. And if we're looking for guys that Paddy could beat, there's an option for you.
That's a fair point. I mean, if you're looking for big names, you could throw in Conor McGregor as well. Why not throw Conor in there?
Fuck's sake, what are we doing, lads?
Oh, Harry, we're going to send Harry to bed early if we stay going here.
McGregor. Oh my Christ.
Well, I don't know. I think
Theo was going to say, by the way, I thought Theo was going to say Brendan Loughnane. Because from a European regional scene, that's a fight that those guys have been talking about for fucking ever. And, Brendan Loughnane's second season at the PFL didn't go amazingly. Obviously, the PFL do not want to lose this European poster boy that they have in Brendan Loughnane. But if the UFC did ever want to swallow their ego, that's a very, very easy matchup to make now. I think Brendan Loughnane smokes Paddy Pimblett at this point. But that's a name that they can build. But to me, fuck Dillon Danis. The answer to me is something like a Dan Hooker, because if he loses to Dan Hooker, the rhetoric isn't that terrible. Dan Hooker is in and around that BMF whatever conversation. He's loved by the fans because he goes out on a shield, whatever. It'd be a crazy fight, whatever happens. Paddy can absolutely rebuild from a Dan Hooker loss should it happen, because it's not going to be a Nad Narimari or a Soren back where he's taken down and held down for 3 rounds. It's not going to be any of that, right? Like, it's either going to be a bloodbath and Dan Hooker's going to finish him, or Paddy is going to find a way to his back and finish him there. And like, that's what the UFC does to capitalize on Paddy Pimblett now, is they start putting him in really, really fun matchups.
Yeah, I like that. I honestly do like that that Dan Hooker fight.
Fuck Dylan Dennis.
Dylan Dennis, I don't know. Yeah. I mean, from a marketing perspective, it's where the UFC are going. I can see where you're coming from, Theo, but fuck.
They're in the business of making money at this point, honestly, boys. Like, I think we're kidding ourselves if we're thinking, oh, they would never do that. They have done much more egregious things than that.
True that, for sure. Moving on, let's rattle through the rest of these cards. I'm just going to scoot over and back from the two of you guys, and let's talk about the next couple of fights. One of the knockouts of the year, and one of the scariest knockouts that we've ever seen inside the UFC octagon, came by the hands of Josh Emmett, who absolutely landed with pitch perfect accuracy on Bryce Mitchell's jaw and sent him into a literal seizure inside the octagon. Harry, crazy to see.
Thank fuck Bryce Mitchell's okay. I mean, thank fuck, because that was one of the scariest knockouts I have ever seen. And look, we can say whatever we want about Bryce Mitchell, but fair play to him for making the statement that he did. I think it was yesterday where he publicly thanked Josh Emmett for not landing any follow-up shots. Not only was that very cool from Josh Emmett, but also fair play to Mitchell for realizing that was the thing. Josh Emmett is a very frustrating fighter in that he has such cheat code power that he invests so little into jabs that he just waits for his turn, explodes into the pocket, and absolutely decimates fellas. And look, it was absolutely amazing to watch the level of power that he generated with that overhand right. But Jesus Christ, it's so scary to watch that man compete, you know? Yeah. So scary.
It's funny that you said that about his power and he's like kind of shying away from other kind of techniques, because I asked him that, like I said, at this late stage of your career, you know, what can you do to improve yourself? And he said kind of drill and drill your grappling and everything like that, because he says, you know, he had somewhat fallen in love with the knockout, where that when you can do that to somebody, well, why bother do anything else? You know what I'm saying? And he said that, you know, that kind of has taken away from his overall game. I just responded, well, you didn't do yourself any favors tonight, Josh. You definitely didn't with that knockout, but that was a serious knockout. Let's move on to the light heavyweight division, Theo.
Can I whet your appetite with a name?
Oh, yes, please do. Please, sir. Yeah.
2 options. The one they might do is Giga Chikadze again, right? And hope that Giga can make it to the fight. If not, what about Edson Barbosa versus Josh Emmett?
I like that one. What about you, Theo? Dylan Daz?
No, maybe not Dylan for this one. But Barbosa's a great fight as well, honestly. And to get to the light heavyweights, like you were saying, Alonzo Menifield, very sneaky, has gone 6-1-1 over the last 3 years. This is a guy on the rise. I think his power showed in this fight as well. Like, Jacoby had great moments on the feet, but Alonzo had the only knockdown in the fight. Man, that's a guy who I could see rising up the ranks very quickly at light heavyweight, especially when you consider how scarce that division kind of is. It doesn't really have the same kind of depth that, you know, the lower weight classes do. But yeah, I thought Alonzo Menifield was incredible. Again, like, the power difference was just evident in this fight. Like, Jacoby wasn't really getting outclassed per se, but
I thought he was getting a little bit outclassed in the first round now, which I think made the overall kind of performance very good, and the fact that he came back and won rounds 2 and round 3. Well, maybe outclassed is a bit of a stretch, but he was definitely having a lot of problems with the jab of Jacoby and the range of Jacoby and just kind of the overall kind of striking of Jacoby in round 1. But, you know, he overcame those. Obviously, Pat Barry is in his corner as well and kind of gave him some good advice in between rounds, I thought. And he came back out and, you know, hurt Jacoby in round 2 and went on to win round 3, hurt him on a couple of occasions as well in round 3. Like, I mean, given that fact, when you start off well and then you can come back into the fight, it just proved the character of Alonzo Menifield on top of everything else is kind of improving. Wouldn't you agree, Theo?
Well, yeah, I mean, the fact that he was able to come back and compete in that fight was extremely impressive. But still, like Alonzo Menifield, like I was saying, the power is really what won him that fight. Especially if we consider how well Jacoby came on afterwards. Like I think that honestly, if you have that nuclear option like Alonzo Menifield does, I'm not saying he's the most beautiful, most polished striker, but when you have that nuclear option, it can make up for a lot of mistakes that you have in the octagon. And I think that he could do very well at the top of the rankings.
100%. Do you have a name, Harry?
Volkan Ozdemir.
Yes, I love it. I love it. Yeah, I really do like that. I think the next fight that we'll talk about, guys, we'll probably bring everybody in because this was an absolutely insane fight. Irene Aldana, she came in at UFC 189, one of the biggest fights of her career so far, and just did not perform. I was there. I watched it live. It was a really poor performance. It was like she didn't have any output. She froze in the moment when she took on Amanda Nunes. What do you do to kind of right those wrongs? You come in and you have a fight like she did on Saturday night with Karol Rosa, winning a unanimous decision, 29-28. These two women went to absolute war. And this could be highlighted as one of the fights of the year, one of the best fights in women's mixed martial arts history. We could probably label it as well. I don't know whether you guys agree with that or not, but it was absolutely insane. Harry, I'll go to you first for your thoughts.
I just absolutely fucking savagery all around. That third round was just absolute wonderfulness all around. Like, look, Aldana really should have won this fight a little bit more handy than she did. I think she didn't stick behind the length of her jab enough, and she allowed Karol Rosa to really get inside some of those pocket exchanges. But I was very impressed with Karol Rosa's body kicking. I was very impressed with her ability to land off of Aldana's low kicks, and just the toughness from both women was outstanding. It was just a wonderful stand-up display. Obviously, neither one of these cunts fancied the takedown. Fair play to them. I ain't got no problem with that. But look, I mean, we talk about damage. We talk about being able to compete at the elite level and needing cardio and needing toughness alongside technical capability. I mean, look no further than this one. Both of these ladies were streaming piss in blood by the end of this fight. And I mean, just warriors, absolute warriors. Unbelievable fight. They should have been paid way more than 50 Gs.
100%. Neither were available, obviously, for the chat afterwards. But Theo, something that Harry said there is very true. I'm wondering if you agree with it as well. Do you think some of the circumstances surrounding her last fight kind of added into Irene Aldana wanting to fight this fight the way she fought it, in terms of just standing toe to toe and going to war here with Karol Rosa, in terms that she probably was the better overall well-rounded fighter and she could have won a lot easier, but she woke up and she chose violence on Saturday morning, and I'm sure for I'm glad that she did, because it made for a really, really exciting fight.
Yeah, exciting fight is, underselling it to a million degrees. That was one of the best women's fights I've ever seen in my life. That was incredible, mixed martial arts. And honestly, I do believe that the last performance against Amanda Nunes is kind of what woke up Irene Aldana to sort of come out here and, either she's going to get an amazing victory or go out on her shield, really. That's kind of like what I feel like she told herself before this fight, the way that she went out there. And in the beginning as well, Rosa was killing that lead leg of Irene Aldana. I mean, like, I can't remember the last time I saw a leg that was that beat up that early in a fight. Like, you could see the effect of it right away. And it did definitely alter her movement as well. And that's what I think makes it so impressive, that she was able to overcome that and still put that kind of a beating on Karol Rosa. Man, like, I could go on and on about this fight. It's just incredible. Like, I am going to be rewatching this one over and over and over again for quite some time.
I definitely am as well. I just got to witness it without any sound in the media tent there now, so I didn't get to take it in as good as I wanted to. Unfortunately, circumstances when you got to get interviews, you don't get to see all of those fights. That was one I was really upset I didn't get to see live, but those are the breaks when you're there at a live event. Do you have a name, Harry?
Juliana Pena.
But boom. You think you're going to throw Juliana Pena in there? Is she not going to go for the title next?
Is she? Don't know.
Yeah, interesting. I like that fight though. I like that fight. I think we will see it one way or another over the next year or two. I'll go to you, Theo. Cody Garbrandt picked up a nice win in round 1 against Brian Kelleher. Oh, Harry's not impressed here. I'll let Theo go first, Harry, and you can share. Oh my goodness, you always throw a spanner into the works, Mr. Powell. Talk to me about that performance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Incredible. I mean, honestly, I was worried because it looked like the old Cody Garbrandt was coming out, the one that gets himself in these bad situations, the one that just kind of wants to put his head down and swing sometimes and just feel like he's got to get the guy. But it worked out this time. In the last fight we saw him against, he just didn't look like the same kind of guy. Like, he was sort of taking a more measured approach. He wasn't getting into the firefights. This one, it felt like he was about to get to that spot, and I was thinking, oh no, Cody's going to do it again, isn't he? And then all of a sudden, boom, Kelleher's out, done. Honestly, I don't know how much is left for Cody Garbrandt at this stage of his career. Like, could he make another title run? I think it's a pretty tough ask, especially at 135. That's a super deep division, and the top is super heavy as well. But this guy still has enough to have a lot of fun fights at a high level. I say give him Dom Cruz next. Let's just run a rematch back for UFC 300. That's a great fight.
Harry, were you not entertained?
Fucking not. Like,
what?
Cody got, I think Theo nailed it, which was Cody is exactly who he always has been. He had one absolutely incredible, one of my favorite MMA performances of all time, which was the Dom Cruz fight. Hands down, one of the most beautiful performances we have ever seen in MMA. Then he forgot that he could do that to other fighters, right? And everything is just head down. I wait for the pocket and I throw big swings. Pedro Munoz was the same. TJ Dillashaw was the same. The way he fights is exactly the same. It's just that they put him in against Brian Kelleher, who is susceptible to those sorts of situations. And he looked exactly the same. Like, exactly the same. He puts his chin down and he bangs. There was one beautiful left hook from him in that Brian Kelleher performance. But other than that, he's the same fighter, and he's going to be found out in exactly the same ways if you push him to the elite level. I wouldn't do the Dom Cruz. The name I have is match him back with Bautista. Give him Mario Bautista.
He called out Dustin Figueiredo after the fight. I'd like to see it.
He gets fucking smoked by Dustin Figueiredo. Like,
yeah, but like let's see what happens. Would you not like that fight? Do you not think the raw power that he has though does make that fight a little bit interesting? I think we saw flashes of him not getting drawn in this fight, but it's easy to do that when you're fighting a guy like Brian Kelleher, who's really not that great.
I think very, very quick cliff notes. Davison Figueiredo runs across the case, takes him down and chokes him. That's what happens in that fight. But the reason why I picked Bautista is because why does Cody Garbrandt, after being out for so long and then beating somebody of the caliber, no offense, of Brian Kelleher, why does he get a Davison Figueiredo name? Like, we need to be pushing through the guys, like we talked about with Rakhmonov and Thompson and that division circulating, and equally Pantoja and Royval and the Moreno name that's being circulated. Mario Bautista needs a name, right? If Garbrandt goes out and knocks out Mario Bautista, all right, cool, do Davison Figueiredo, no problem. Now you've earned your way back up into that big name status. But Cody Garbrandt was a big name 5 years ago. I don't think that necessarily equates to him getting somebody of the level of caliber of Davison Figueiredo right out of the gate.
No, that's fair. That's fair. No, I can't argue with that much. I like that Davison Figueiredo fight. I think it's an interesting one. And it'd be interesting to see what happens with Cody Garbrandt down through the years. Let's move on to the flyweight division fight. Tagir Ulanbekov defeated Cody Durden via submission, a rear naked choke. I was very impressed by Ulanbekov in this fight. A couple of fouls throughout this fight, Harry, though, that did help him along the way. But overall, showed a good level of strength, good level of top control, and was a very dominant performance from Ulanbekov overall.
I agree. Yeah, really fun fight. Cody Durden is a fight that's way better than his record, I think. But I have also noticed, I noted here, how many times are we going to let lads grab the fence before we do something about it? Like there was like 2 or 3 fence grabs that either kept him up or kept him in good position. And fair play to Durden, he didn't complain. But what are you going to do? Like, what the fuck are you going to do? How many? I have very, very, very seldomly seen a referee either stand a couple of guy up or reverse a position or, do anything of note when it comes to fence grabs. And so fair play, just keep grabbing him. Even in the Royval fight, like, I think Royval had his toes in the cage as he was trying to invert out of a back control. And all the ref did is just pull his toes out and slam him back to the mat. And we're like, what does that do? You just fucking done nothing. Like this is ridiculous. But I like Ulanbekov. I think he's come on leaps and bounds in the last couple of while in terms of now he is using all of the tools he has available in his grappling realms. I think the striking still needs a little bit of work. He's very long, right? And so I really like watching long strikers, but he still has some work to sort of really accentuate the length of his range. The name is Astro Boy. Give him Steve Erceg.
Oh yeah, I like that fight. That's very interesting. I do like that. Theo, move on to you. Andre Fili defeated Lucas Almeida TKO in the first round. This could have been a potential banana skin for Andre Fili. This was a tough fight on paper for him, but he went out there and he put on a hell of a performance, really, didn't he?
Yeah, man, it felt like he really got onto that flow state. Like, it really just felt like, and honestly, to be honest with you guys, like coming into this fight, it felt like Andre Fili was a guy who just really hadn't put it together. He had all the physical abilities. He's an athletic guy, great, powerful striker as well. But like, over his next couple fights, it just felt like, whether he wasn't there mentally or just couldn't mix together the other parts of his game. And I don't know, I'm sure exactly what I would point to for the number one reason. But it felt like in this fight, he finally put some stuff together. And once he got into that good flow state, like I said, it just felt like he couldn't miss. And so, he said as well afterwards, like he was treating like he was coming into this fight as his UFC debut. And it felt like he was rejuvenated in there completely. Like he did not look like a guy who was having a ton of pressure on himself. He just went in there and fought, man. And I thought he looked fantastic. I don't know how high the ceiling could be for Andre Fili, but this guy could be around for the UFC for a while, and he could have some great fights.
He's been around for a little while, and he'll probably be around for a lot longer more, but he seems to be his own worst enemy because we have no level of consistency with Andre Fili inside the octagon, and he needs to kind of sort that out if he's going to go on any kind of run, in my opinion. Do you have a name for him, Harry?
Diogo Lopez.
Oh, nice. I'm going to stick with you for Shamil Gaziev, who picked up a great win over Martin Buday in the first round. I was worried in this fight that he kind of blew his wad in the first round. He was pushed hard for the finish, opened up a nasty cut with a knee. Buday stayed in it, but it was clear that Buday didn't want anything to do with this guy. And for a UFC debut performance, this was rather impressive. Would you agree?
It was, yeah. I mean, look, Gaziev is going to need to look a little cleaner on some of the shot selection. But for a heavyweight to go to the body as much as he did, that's impressive. I really took note of how willing he was to bang away at the body, to bang away at the legs. He was happy to go up top with not just big swinging wild heavyweight hooks, but there were jabs, there were straights, there were elbows, there were hooks, there were knees, there were lots and lots of variety. And that alone is very impressive to me. So fair play to Gaziev. That's a big performance on a big card to make your UFC debut. I want to chuck him in with Alexander Romanov. And I want to do that because he can bang away at Romanov as much as he wants on the feet. And we're going to see potentially a little bit of the grappling. And that's really the realm that I would like to see Gaziev in now. If he beats Romanov, cool, no problem. We can put him in with, the Sergey Spivak or, somebody in and around that realm and start to build him graciously. But yeah, we could have something interesting here. I don't think we're looking at a challenger to Tom Aspinall, Cyril Gagné, Johnny Bones Jones, Stipe Miocic, these kind of people. But we've got an interesting guy in Gaziev. He could do some interesting things in the heavyweight division.
Indeed, he could. And that wraps us up for the balance breakdown.
Lipski and your sister.
Oh, Lipski. I can't believe I forgot Lipski. I wanted to brush over that because my sister, Casey O'Neill, did not perform in that. Actually, yeah, that was a big mess up by me. But Lipski performed tremendously well in this fight, Harry. And Casey O'Neill, yeah, like we were high on Ariane Lipski and we were like putting bets on her and everything like that, and she really let us down in one of those fights. I think it was against Valentina Shevchenko or Antonina Shevchenko. But ever since that loss, she has been absolutely unbelievable. And this performance was excellent as well. Look at Casey O'Neill didn't look all that great either, but she wasn't made look great by Lipski, who started the fight as she meant to go on and just moved forward and went on and just blasted her out of there. And it was a really impressive finish in round 2 by armbar.
Absolutely. I think we really got to see Lipski's speed. I think, Theo nailed it with saying that Andre Fili sort of got to a flow state. I felt like Lipski got to a flow state as well very, very quickly here. The jab was working, the leg kicks were working, the side kicks were working, the right hook was working. She just looked great all and over, right? The uppercut was really, really, really nice in this. And it just felt like Casey O'Neill was 3 or 4 beats behind at all times. And she's tough, right? And she worked her way in. In the last couple of minutes, O'Neill looked pretty good, using her kicks better and landing well. But yeah, in that second round, the big overhand right wobbles Casey, and it's Case Sarah from there. And let me see Ariane Lipski versus Tracy Cortez. Thanks
Nice.
very much.
I'm sure you were just as impressed, Theo, with her performance.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like at least in the rhythm part of the fight, it sort of mirrored the main event where, like, it felt like Lipski just didn't allow O'Neill to get going. She led the dance the entire time. She interrupted her rhythm. She interrupted her patterns. It just felt like she dictated the entire fight on the feet as well, which is something that we said coming into this, like, well, if Casey doesn't get her down on the ground early, like this could sort of turn into one of those fights early where Lipski just sort of kind of dictates the pace on the feet. And then she ended up getting the finish on the ground as well. Great performance from her, like you guys have mentioned as well. She can move the rankings very easily at women's flyweight.
Absolutely. She's kind of living up to her Queen of Violence moniker that she brought into from KSW. We were excited to see her coming into the UFC. Rocky start, but she's finally finding her feet there. She picked up a Performance of the Night award for that performance, as did Irene Aldana and Karol Rosa, as did Shamil Gaziev, as did Josh Emmett and Bryce Mitchell. I think, Theo, those are pretty fair bonuses. Or do you feel anyone might have missed out on one?
I mean, if you're going to ask me about how I feel fighters should be paid more, I think, I think they all deserve bonuses, to be honest
100%.
with you. But, I can't disagree with those options, obviously. They were tremendous performances as well. I think they stood out amongst the others on the card. But, I think it's about time we raise it from 50,000. What do you say?
Yes, that's right. Give us a 75,000. Give us 100,000. Give us 100 million bonuses for fighters, because they deserve it all in the UFC. They definitely don't get paid enough. But that's it. That's a wrap for the balance breakdown. I tried to do it once. Harry stopped me to do it second. It's been a pleasure. That's the year done. We're taking a couple of weeks off from the balance breakdown. We'll be back in January, back in full swing again on the balance breakdown. And thanks everybody for listening. Thanks to Harry Powell at BJJ_Harry Powell at Theo Lander. Follow them on social media at O'Neill MMA is where you'll catch me. Thank you all for your love and support, and we'll see you the next time.